Yesterday, the Department of Justice disclosed details on a major international operation conducted by the FBI and French authorities targeting Chinese state-sponsored cyber threats. Now, the effort remotely removed malicious software that was implanted in thousands of critical networks worldwide by Beijing-linked hacking groups. And the operation underscores the growing concern over China's aggressive cyber activities, which U.S. officials warn are positioned to disrupt critical infrastructure at a moment's notice. So how great of a threat does China pose to America's future? Joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman John Moolenaar. He is the chairman of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. He represents the 2nd Congressional District of the state of Michigan. Chairman Moolenaar, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Tony. Good to be with you.
So let's start with your assessment of the FBI's and the French authorities' operation to dismantle these Chinese malware from critical networks. How significant is this, and how much more is out there that we don't know about?
Well, that's a great question. And first of all, it is very serious. We've seen the Chinese hacking and monitoring people's phone conversations at the highest levels of government. We've seen they're hacking in public infrastructure that, it could be water, it could be important vital infrastructure that we need to protect, civilian infrastructure. And we've seen them, spying on American territory right in our home state of Michigan. We had 5 Chinese nationals spying at Camp Grayling, watching military exercises. So they are very aggressive, and they have a surveillance state that at home that oppresses 1.3 billion Chinese, and they're wanting to export that around the world.
So let me ask you about that, going a little bit deeper. When we look at all of the products now that are created or manufactured in China, is there concern that some of those devices could be utilized for spying?
Absolutely. And one of the goals of our committee, which is very bipartisan, is to make sure we aren't funding our own demise. We're not funding businesses that work with the People's Liberation Army. We're not funding technologies, and we're controlling technologies that could be used against our American men and women in the armed forces. And so this is a all-hands-on-deck effort to restrict an aggressive power. When you think of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, we never would have partnered with them on the kinds of things we partner with China on. And I think Ronald Reagan had it right, peace through strength, and let's make sure we don't help our adversaries succeed.
Let me explore that a little bit more, Mr. Chairman, because it's not just the government. We're talking about consumers in this country that are attracted to cheaper Chinese products that in the end are actually fueling our adversary, that they're turning those profits into what we saw here, dispatching these hackers to break into U.S. databases and other infrastructures. So this is not just the government. It's a kind of an all hands on deck to defend America's well-being, and that includes our economic well-being.
It really is. And there's 2 things that people should know about China. First, that it's governed by the Chinese Communist Party, and that right at the head is Xi Jinping. They are committing a genocide against peoples in China. So we love the Chinese people, but this authoritarian regime is more and more oppressive. They have laws on the book, what they consider to be national security laws that require anyone, any Chinese person, any person, in fact, even in doing business in China, to be accountable to the Chinese Communist Party. And if they require information, there's no such thing as a private sector. They have a military-civil fusion that gives priority to the military or the Chinese Communist Party. So it's a very different framework than we're used to dealing with. And so that's what makes it so serious when we trade or when we invest in Chinese entities. That can all be used against us and our allies.
So bottom line is that any interaction with a Chinese company, we just have to basically count on it going to the Chinese Communist Party.
That's right. And they've been stealing technology, intellectual property for years. And And more nefarious, they're using dollars, in fact, even research dollars from the Department of Defense for military applications that could be used against our men and women in the armed forces.
That almost sounds insane, that we would be funding that we would be giving our adversaries the money to build technology to use against us.
You know, one of the things our committee found is that there were over 30 partnerships in universities in the United States that were partnering with Chinese universities and funded often by Department of Defense dollars. And they were collaborating on research in the highest technologies of physics, even weapons, all sorts of things. So we raised this issue, and fortunately, Berkeley, Georgia Tech, and most recently the University of Michigan have discontinued those. And we're going to take it one by one and make sure we are not allowing, and that these universities partnerships that can be used against us.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you also had some success in getting the Department of Defense to back away and blacklist certain Chinese companies that have those same connections.
You know, we've been advocating for whether it's the use of slave labor or partnering with the Chinese military. We don't want to advance those kinds of business in China. At the same time, we also have done a report that showed the Chinese complicity with the fentanyl crisis in the United States. And what we found is that the Chinese government was actually offering rebates, a financial incentive for Chinese companies to manufacture the chemical precursors that go into the fentanyl that's poisoning hundreds of thousands of Americans. So it's a dangerous regime. Ronald Reagan had it right, peace through strength. We love the Chinese people, but we have to be shrewd as a serpent, innocent in a dove when it comes to this.
Absolutely. Chairman Moolenaar, you've raised the concern, like we just saw with this malware targeting certain infrastructures. Are you concerned about infrastructures like water treatment plants, energy grids? Are those vulnerable, and how vulnerable are they?
Absolutely. And I liken it like a sleeper cell on the grid or in the water system where they have malware that can be flipped on and off. They've actually put mobile, areas of ways to monitor what's going in and out of our ports. All of this creates danger for America, and we need to be vigilant in protecting this. So we need to push back on this. I think this idea of dialogue with the Chinese Communist Party, all they respect is strength, and I'm pleased that President Trump, I think, is going to be a strong negotiator in pushing back on this.
Are there any proactive measures being taken? I know we just talked about at the top of the program what the FBI and the French did, but are there more proactive measures to defend the power grid, the treatment plants and such?
Well, we're getting Huawei as a Chinese company. We're requiring that to be taken out of our systems. We're requiring different companies that partner with the military not to be used in our supply chains for our defense industrial base. So we're doing things, but we've got to do it in a much more aggressive, focused way. Even though it's going to cost more, it's beneficial for the United States' security.
Final question for you, Mr. Chairman. We just have about 45 seconds left, but the outgoing FBI Director Chris Wray, as I played that clip at the top of the program, said the China and its cyber program, that's the defining threat of our generation. And he emphasized the urgency of countering these escalating threats. Do you agree with his assessment?
I do agree, and I think this needs to be a major focus. Cyber is now one of the major domains for warfare. You think land, water, sea, space, cyber, all of those are key, and we need to be strong in this area, and we need to make sure that we're aware that China is trying to hack us every day and trying to pre-position malware on our devices that would threaten our way of living. So absolutely, he's right on that.
Chairman Moolenaar, I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank you for your work on this, because I agree with your assessment as well as the outgoing FBI director. I think China is in the long term, our biggest threat, and we have to deal with it, and it is all hands on deck. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tony. Good to be with you.